I am joined by Adam of Plugged In. Hello, sir.
How are you doing today?
Do you know? Not too bad. Yeah, not too bad. I call it fair to middling. It's a
Yes,
phrase,
fair to Midland. Yep,
Okay, you know that one. It's not great,
I'm
not
familiar with
bad.
that phrase.
So
Yep,
yeah,
fair to
fair to
Midland.
middling.
I actually had a best friend growing up who would say that all the time, so I'm very familiar with that phrase.
There you are. Cool. Very good. Right. Now, you do reviews for us of a myriad, a plethora, a
A plethora,
smorgasbord
a
of
veritable
stuff.
cornucopia.
Absolutely. Where would you like to start us off today?
It's hard to say. It's a little bit of a weak week, movie wise. August is sort of the dumping ground for all the junk that nobody really cares about, or late August. And that is definitely the case this week because the highest profile thing this week is a movie called Shin Godzilla, which actually came out in 2016 and is getting, for some reason, I don't even know why, a re-release. Um, but what's interesting about Shin Godzilla is it's not just another Godzilla movie. And if you're a Godzilla super fan, you already know everything I'm about to say. But people may not realize that the original Godzilla with Raymond Burr that came out, I believe, in 1958 was an allegory about nuclear destruction. So it would have been 13 years after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And Godzilla was a symbol for the danger of nuclear devastation. So it was, we're going to talk about what it was like to have nuclear bombs dropped on us, but we're going to use this monster as a symbolic stand-in. Well, that didn't last very long, right? Before it just turned into the Godzilla we all know and love. It's just, this monster romping around, and now there are other monsters and they fight each other, and we all know that it's dudes in suits, stomping through models, but we love it. Like I watched Godzilla movies growing up. So Shin Godzilla is actually, it's not a remake per se, but it's sort of a one-off reboot of as if there had never been a Godzilla movie before. And this one, what makes it interesting is it has some of those elements of the cautionary allegory to it, but it also is a satire of government inefficiency of all things, because the Japanese governments and the world governments can't figure out what to do about Godzilla. And so it really is, there's a surprising amount of depth here for a Godzilla movie. And fans of Godzilla movies have said this is probably top three. The original 1958 one, a lot of people put this one at number two, and then the one that just came out like a year or so ago at number three. So if you're a Godzilla fan, it's a pretty good movie. And there's not much content. There's a tiny bit of profanity, and it is a guy in a suit. It's not CGI. They decided to do it old school style. So, if you're not a Godzilla fan, you probably checked out the minute I said Godzilla, but you can check back in now. We'll talk about some other things. That is in theaters this week.
I respect for them for doing it. The man in the suit. I respect the impressiveness of CGI. I
Yes.
do have to be honest. I like old school. I like a bloke in a suit pretending to
Yep.
be an 80-foot dinosaur. I like that.
Yep. I do too. It still very much works for me. So there you go.
Righty ho. Where should we go next?
Did we talk about Wednesday last week? I don't think we
I don't
did.
think we did. No.
So Wednesday is a show on Netflix. And of course, Wednesday Addams is a character from the old Addams Family show that was on in the 1960s. Wednesday really focuses on her. She's played by Jenna Ortega. This is a show that generated a lot of interest when its first season was out way back in 2022. Now the second season is out, and Wednesday Addams is at a school for, we'll call them special kids,
Yeah.
werewolves, monsters, that sort of thing. And wouldn't you know it, really bad things tend to happen there. Like people end up dead, and monstrous things are kind of going on, and occult and magical things are going on. And the normies in town don't really care too much for the monster kids that go to Monster High School on the outskirts of town. And so there's tension there. So This show is back. It's TV 14 here in the US. I'm not sure what the British rating would be. And 14 feels about right. There's some profanity. I would say there's a creepy vibe to it, and a lot of occult-ish sort of content. I will say Jenna Ortega is really impressive as Wednesday Addams. She's this sort of deadpan, very serious, barely ever smiles, but she will not be pushed around or intimidated by anybody. And so, as a sort of girl empowerment story, I can understand why this has been popular among young teen girls. My girls, when they first started watching, I'm like, all right, time out. This has some stuff in it. We're going to watch this together and talk about it. And I think it's navigable. I also think there are a lot of families that are going to look at some of the stuff here and say, yeah, we can probably find better role models for our daughters, even though Jenna Ortega does a pretty good job embodying Wednesday Addams.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, occultic stuff that's going to make people think yes or no, I suspect.
Right. That's the checkout point for a lot of people. So,
Yeah. Might call it
so
the Marmite
that is
factor over here.
Wednesday. What's that?
Might call it the Marmite factor over here. Have you heard of Marmite?
Yes,
Okay. I would
I
say that
have.
was the Marmite point. You either
Yep.
love it or you hate it, or you're going to be okay with
Yep.
it.
I thought Marmite was Australian, or is that Vegemite?
That's Vegemite, slightly different. Marmite, yeah, that's different. I've never tried Vegemite. I don't know how similar it is. I think some people have said it's better than Marmite, but hey, we're not here to talk about Marmite.
I don't have access to either one. So
No, well, fair enough. Marmite is, yes, I think people love it or hate it. We had a Marmite Easter egg that's just wrong on every single possible level of ruining chocolate and Easter.
that's really funny. That is funny.
It wasn't funny to eat. Where would you like to go next? Sorry.
Well, we have a book out fairly recently. It is called The Gate, the Girl, and the Dragon. And this is a book aimed at like 8 to 12-year-old girls. And it is largely based on Chinese mythology. And so, again, for some people, that might be a deal killer. I am glad to say that we don't have too much content in this book, and there's a real emphasis on good versus evil, because it focuses on sort of a magical lion who's really selfish, and he's supposed to protect people, but he doesn't. And he gets sort of cast into the realm of humans and has a couple other magical friends who sort of teach him the importance of why we need to do our job and why the humans are worth protecting. So it's a fun sort of magical, mystical young adult story. And again, different families have different perspectives on how much of different worldviews or mythologies they're willing to tolerate. But as these things go, I feel like this one has fewer problems than a lot of things in this genre. And I think one of the unfortunate things that has happened in the fantasy genre in general is even stuff that is supposedly aimed at younger kids. Man, there's sort of frog in the kettle, temperature creeping up here with language, with sexual content. It's like all of a sudden it's not enough to just have a sword and sorcery or a dragon oriented story. We have to have all of this explicit content too. And that annoys me. Call me a purist. I'm really fine with just the fantasy component. We don't need to make it R-rated to make it somehow more appealing. And so I think when a story like this one comes along, if you're looking for just kind of a fun story that you could read with your kids, and then you could have a conversation, I think, about stewardship, about identity, when we have a sense of what our responsibility is, but we want to run away from it. Why is that? Maybe you could talk about Jonah. This is not a book about Jonah and the whale, but I think when we look, there are almost always those sorts of connecting points to an idea or a story in scripture. I think this one is more accessible than some. So it's nice to have something every now and then that we can say, yeah, it's not perfect, but it's probably navigable.
It's good. It's good that there is some good stuff around. I was thinking about particularly movies. I mean, you go back not very long in time, you would either watch a movie at the cinema and then
Yep.
6 months, 12 months, whatever the time was, you get it on the
Right.
video VHS cassette as it was back then and now
Yes.
DVD. That
The
obviously
way
has
God
changed.
intended.
Absolutely.
You had to rewind it. And when you paused something, it would be all jumpy and scratchy.
Yeah.
It didn't work.
No, but at least it was where you left it, which is another thing.
Exactly.
But there's loads of stuff on TV now where I just think, are they doing it this way in order to, I mean, obviously to make money, but are they doing it just to try and get some bad language and some inappropriate content?
Oh, I think so.
I just think more and more, if this was a movie, like the British, I know we talk about the BBFC, the classification systems over here and there, and they're quite strict on what it's going to be. But I remember watching Pearl Harbor, a completely stupid scene in the middle of it, which I cut out for my boys to watch. I think it's quite a good film. But this scene made absolutely no difference to the film. And I can only think, why did you need to have a gratuitous sex scene in the middle of a film remembering Pearl Harbor, which is, let's be respectful towards that. But I cut a scene out. The boys watched it, didn't even notice. Why? Because it didn't need to be there. Apart from the fact that it was matter.
It was the definition of gratuitous. Now, we could say explicit sex scenes are always gratuitous, and that, I don't want to suggest that there are sometimes it's artistically necessary. But certainly in a movie like that, obviously they're trying to ramp up the content because they think that that's going to make it more appealing to somebody. And the reality is it doesn't. It actually limits your audience. And especially in a historical movie like that one, it's like, why do we need that? Come on.
Well, just momentarily pausing here, what bugged me was this is a film about war. So I'm going to go on a limb here, generalizing. Men may well want to watch that perhaps more than women will because it's about fighting and planes and all that.
Right.
Well, if men want to watch that, they don't need a sex scene with a woman to want to watch the film because they're already watching it. So it just get out of the way. It's really irritating. Move out of the way, get back to the story.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. And unfortunately, everybody is competing for eyeballs, competing for attention. And there is somewhere in Hollywood, this idea that explicit content somehow makes something more appealing. And for those of us who just want a good story, I'm like, okay, can you not? Yeah. Right? Let's go back to Casablanca and watch a great movie that doesn't have very much apart from, I guess, an affair wrong with it, right? Like Hollywood made movies for a long time that were incredibly entertaining, well acted, well written, that were not loaded up with all of this nasty content. And about the late 60s or so, when the Motion Picture Association came into being, and I think the rating system, at least as we have it in the United States, I think it came into existence in 1969. Now it's like, we can rate things for adults and rate things for kids, but I think it just opened Pandora's box.
I agree. A little bit of an Andy B rant. Adam, thank you. How can we find out all the reviews and more?
You can come to pluggedin.com, and we are a ministry of Focus on the Family.
Adam, thank you. Back next week for more.
You bet. Thank you, Andy. Bye-bye.